And welcome to our Free Speech TV conversation on net neutrality. I'm Tom Harmon, and with us is Aaron McKee, folk rock singer, songwriter, Future of Music Coalition; Georgia Archer, director of Barbershop Punt, great movie; Josh Levy, internet campaign director with Free Press; and Jamel King, news editor with Color Lines. And I'd like to just let each person introduce themselves a minute or two, and who they are and their thoughts on what's going on here with regard to net neutrality. Aaron, can I start with you?
Yeah, absolutely. Hi, everybody. Thanks so much for having me on here. Aaron McKee, musician, writer, producer. I work with Future Music Coalition. I've been an independent musician for the last 15 plus years. I have 9 albums. I work on all kinds of projects with all kinds of different musicians at different levels, and I've been involved with talking about net neutrality at least since 2008, 2009, and I think the reason that it's most important for me as a musician is, you know, my job is to connect with as many people as possible and to be as available as possible. That's the only way that I know I can survive and have a sustainable career in the current music industry. And when we have this type of interference from telecommunication companies and this type of privileging of information, my ability, for example, to reach as many people as possible gets hindered, gets throttled. And I will just say also that I am coming to you today from a cabin in rural western Massachusetts on a connection by our friends at Verizon. I'm on something that's called dry loop DSL, so it's just DSL, no phone line. And I've had this internet connection for the past 4 years, and it's been consistently degraded over and over and over again to the point now where I'm literally back to the place of, if I need to move a big music file, I have to do it before I go to bed at night. And the answer from Verizon is, don't you want to pay more for a better service? And I would actually just like to have the service I've had before working the way it has. So I'll leave it at that as a start.
Great. Georgia, you're up.
Hi, I'm Georgia Archer. I'm the writer-director with my friend Kristen Armfield of the film Barbershop Punt. I'm a documentary filmmaker mostly based in Los Angeles. And I kind of came to this issue what I thought was late to the party about 4 years ago when I was working on the film, and not coming from it from a tech background or a political background, but more just coming from it from a story background. And then once I became more aware of it, I had to become more involved. And I really think my take on where I'm at with it right now is, for me, the most important thing is raising awareness, because I think most of the public is not capitulating with what the telcos are putting out there, or the policies that are being generated, because of apathy, but more because of lack of awareness of the issue. And from where I came from it, I totally understand, because there's so much legal and tech language, and it's not that the issue is intimidating, it can just get very dry and kind of boring sounding, sadly, to some effect. So they walk away before they engage. So I'm hoping in the next couple of weeks, especially before this FCC vote that's coming up, that we can all try to get some more awareness raised so that people can engage, because I really don't think this is a partisan issue. I think it's very much an American issue. It's very much involves the entire public and our access to speech. And then from there, we can go into all the other tentacles of how it's very important for artists, it's very important for retail to get started, but I really think the first step is to raise public awareness on the issue. So that's why I'm here. And I'll let it go for there.
Great. Thank you. Jamila, can I toss it to you, please?
Absolutely. So my name is Jamel King. I am senior editor at colorlines.com. We are a racial justice news site, and I've been covering net neutrality for about the past 4 years. And what's been interesting about it to me is that it is very much a racial justice issue. If you look at, you know, the past 4 or 5 years of political organizing in the Black community or in communities of color, you see that folks have really mobilized online. They've really depended on access to communities outside of their own. You see that with Trayvon Martin, you see that with the Gina 6, you see that with DREAM activists who are organizing along the California border. And so I think it's an incredibly, incredibly important racial justice issue, and that's why I'm here to talk about it today.
Great, thank you. And Josh Levy.
Yeah, hi. So my name is Josh Levy. I'm campaign director at Free Press. and I am involved in this and have been involved with this because we see net neutrality as being core to Free Press's mission as a nonprofit national group that's focused on media and technology policy that favors the public interest and not the interest of big corporations. And net neutrality we see as being on this kind of continuum of internet issues that we have all been fighting for, similar to the SOPA-PIPA fight that occurred a couple of years ago, similar to the fight against mass surveillance that's really started up in earnest last year with the Edward Snowden revelations. All of these issues, including net neutrality, are about our rights to connect and communicate, especially on the internet, which is the foremost platform for communication in the 21st century. So if we don't keep it free and open, we don't have access to the tools that we need to improve our democracy, to engage in politics, to create independent media, and to really participate in culture and society, not just here in the U.S., but around the world. So that's why net neutrality is important here, and it's important everywhere.
Yeah, it's all very well said. I'd just like to add, if I may, that doing 4 hours of live media every day, 3 hours of radio and an hour of television, I encounter this topic a lot, and I found the easiest way to cut through all the tech mumbo-jumbo that the lawyers and the people on other sides of the argument, increasingly now the FCC's side of the argument, like to throw at us, is to simply talk about the commons, the stuff that we all collectively own. You know, our roads are the commons, the air we breathe is the commons, our public schools are the commons, our libraries are part of the commons, and an extension of the commons is this idea of common carrier, that with the telephone companies we used to say, you cannot listen to my phone call and charge me based on what I'm saying or to whom I'm speaking. You can't, you know, if I'm having a conversation with somebody that's making a business deal, you can't say, oh, he's making a business deal, we're going to charge him an extra $50. That kind of thing. And so phone companies have always been common carriers, and therefore we have privacy when we have phone conversations, and we know, you know, we have fixed prices and things like that. And if the FCC would simply define the internet as part of the public commons, and therefore internet service providers, the companies that deliver the internet to your home or your place of work, as a common carrier, they could do like the phone company does and say, we've got a price for business and a price for personal use, but that's pretty much it. And that's something that when the DC court blew up net neutrality, they said, the FCC can do this. All they had to do is write one sentence. And that's been my simple message. Now, I'd like to, if any of you think that's wrong, if there's anything wrong about that or unsophisticated about it, or if it's even not necessarily the best way to communicate it, I'd love to hear that. Anybody want to toss in?
I think you're absolutely correct there, actually, and I think that the argument that gets thrown back is always like the reasons for network management. When I was doing my interviews, that kept coming up, and that's just a ridiculous argument, because we can adjust laws and rules to work within the understanding of needing some kind of control for network management. But I absolutely think putting the internet under the protections of common carriage to some extent is really what's needed, and I don't know why the FCC are being such pussies about it, but it's really irritating.
Yeah.
I mean,
it really is.
We're in the midst of really the worst aspects of the politics of Washington, D.C., and the kind of political calculus where federal agencies that are charged with protecting the public interest, they try to make these political calculations based on what they think is going to be the easiest road for them to go down. And that's what got us here, right? I mean, what you're saying, Tom, is exactly right. The FCC could in the past and can today classify broadband as a telecommunications service, as a utility, and therefore treat broadband providers as common carriers, which would require them to serve everybody equally. But the FCC has just been consistently unable to make that decision and move down that road, because it thinks that politically it's easier to go down this weird middle path where it tries to pass rules based on shaky legal grounds, or in this case, actually pass rules that are endorsed by and probably co-written by the big corporations that the FCC is supposed to be regulating. So I think it's up to us, those people here on this panel today, and the millions of activists around the country that care about this, to make this political move as politically unappealing as possible for the FCC, and to show them that if you do this, this really tanks your reputation and it tanks your ability to actually do anything that would protect the public.
Yeah, and I just want to point out that, you know, all of this is happening, and Tom, you brought up some really great examples of schools and of roads, and a lot of those things are being privatized in the context in which we're talking about net neutrality. And so I think that it's happening within this sphere of mass privatization of public services, and so there really hasn't, I think, on the FCC's part, been a recognition of that, nor would there be.
I just want to add that there was a great, as important as we talk about the FCC and the sort of national level stuff we're talking about, and Tom, I think your point about simplifying it down to FCC needs to write one sentence is a good one. The other thing I want to mention as we talk about this way that we're thinking about the internet is an editorial that was in yesterday's New York Times by Susan Crawford, who was reminding us, I think, reminding us that there are small municipal projects going on right now where areas, towns and cities are building their own fiber networks. Here in Western Massachusetts, we have something called Wired West. And this is something that the FCC has talked about and needs to be continually reminded of supporting on a regulatory level as well.
Mm-hmm. And that's a variation.
I'm sorry, Tom, I seem to have lost your audio for a moment.
Well, I mean, so I'm just interested with the folks who come at this from a musical angle. Like, how do y'all engage? How do y'all engage folks who aren't invested in policy or politics? What are the examples that you guys use?
Well, it's been changing. I mean, one of the first things that I did when I first got involved in this fight was try to start talking about it from the stage. And like, if you try to figure out how to message something, that's like a great like crucible to figure it out, because you can feel right away when you lose people. So I was able to get it down to 2 sentences about. Net neutrality describes an internet that doesn't privilege one type of content over another, and allows for open access and innovation. And then I did an event. I did a live webcast, and I gave my little net neutrality speech, and then I asked everyone in the audience, in the room and also online, to tweet at the same time. And so that was one way that I started doing it, but I started trying to connect these ways that I'm making art. I do a lot of webcasts from my house here. I have a sort of fun internet TV show called Cabin Fever that I do regularly from here. And so in the case of that art, which is like Judy Garland meets Wayne's World, that's sort of how I describe my TV show. I throw in net neutrality all the time. Like, this is happening because of this couldn't happen because of this. And I think that over, I've been doing this since 2007, 2008, and then talking about net neutrality explicitly since then, I'm actually seeing people like start to understand it. And as musicians, for example, we can talk about it in terms of being able to have folks access large files, be able to, for example, buy music from my website just as easily as you'd be able to have Amazon or iTunes load. And that seems to have worked with people. And I'm noticing like a greater facility with people around this issue. And I mean, I think that's why George's movie is great. This way that culture can be a lovely counterpoint or even companion to this policy talk. I think we need both. And I think George's movie and what I like to do as an artist is to try to marry those things in a specific way.
Yeah, awesome. And Tom, are you back with us? Can we hear you now?
Can you hear me now? Can anybody hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
I can hear you.
Great. Okay. Great. Josh, you're leading a campaign on this, and tell us about that.
Yes, the Free Press has been running the SaveTheInternet.com campaign actually since net neutrality first blew up back in about 2006. And what's been really fun to watch has been, after this most recent bit of news last week, SaveTheInternet.com has blown up again, and lots of people are linking to it and coming there. It's been set up to be a pro-net neutrality campaign and website. And if you go there, especially if you click on the Take Action link at SaveTheInternet.com, you'll see a list of all the different things that people can do to take action in this political moment, which means calling the FCC and telling it to throw out these rules and to pass rules that would preserve real net neutrality by reclassifying broadband, calling Congress and telling it to give the same message to the FCC, writing letters, et cetera, et cetera. So you should go there and check out, find ways that you can get involved. What's interesting, and this is actually picking up on what Aaron was just saying, is what I've been noticing is that we all like to talk about how net neutrality is complicated and how it's really hard to explain it to other people. But what I've been noticing is that a lot of people actually get it already, and part of our task is, in addition to educating newcomers about what this issue is and why it's important and why it should matter to them, it's about organizing people who already care. If you go to the comment threads, for example, on like The Verge, which is a popular tech site, when they post anything about net neutrality, there are hundreds and hundreds of comments, and people are outraged, and they're posting GIFs and like posting all kinds of awesome stuff. And the dominant question that emerges over and over again is, how can I get involved? What can I do to stop this? We led a Reddit AMA, which is an Ask Me Anything post on Reddit last week about this issue right after the news broke, and it was on the front page of Reddit all day long. We had 1,500 comments. It was amazing to watch how passionate people are about this issue, and also the really deep questions that they have that come from having a basic understanding of the issue. The questions aren't, please explain net neutrality to me, although that was there a little bit, but it's also, tell me about how the FCC works and why the FCC is in charge of this and what we can do to get them to change their mind and to do the right thing. Tell me about Congress's involvement. All these more involved questions, and I think that this shows that this is really important to people, and they get the basic concept that we should be able to access what we want online. What they want to know is how they can help get involved in this fight.
Josh, I think you're totally right. I think, oh, sorry, go on.
I was just a very quick question. Could the president not call up the his Tom Wheeler, his appointment to the FCC, and say you're fired?
I don't know where Obama is in all of this, because he promised he was going to be responsible toward protecting the internet and very pro net neutrality, as so much of his campaign was based on direct exchange with people, and it was something he spoke a lot of. So I definitely think that's an avenue people need to be banging on that door, because I don't know where he is in this and why he's gone so silent.
Right, and I understand that we now hired 5 lawyers who are all former Comcast and Verizon employees. Jamila, your Color Lines also has a very activist approach to this. You want to tell us about that?
Right. Well, so I mean, like I was saying earlier, the issue of net neutrality for us is and for many people, is a racial justice issue. I think that when you're talking about communities of color, if you look at the statistics, specifically statistics from the Pew Center, they'll show you that folks of color are actually adopting mobile technology at faster rates than other communities. So you have largely young Black and Latino consumers, adopting this technology and not really having the access to really do what they need to do with it, right? So a couple years ago, you had Metro PCS offering different plans that would require folks to pay more for basic services. And I think when you see it like that, when you see that folks of color often rely on one mobile device, they usually don't have landline access. They usually focus primarily on having their tablets or smartphones. And when you see the way in which those are sort of used and those are sort of controlled in a way that landline technology isn't, I think that's really, really problematic. But I think like what Josh was saying earlier, I think I do see some change. I do see some traction on these issues, and I see it most notably with Netflix coming out in their telling the folks who are shareholders of their company that they are for net neutrality, and they actually are. I think that's a really good point of reference for folks, because it's like a lot of folks watch Netflix, and a lot of folks can then see the harm that's going to be done if net neutrality does disappear.
Yeah, although they have already cut a deal apparently with
right.
Comcast, and that's the scary stuff. Georgia, your movie Barbershop Punk is absolutely brilliant. It tells the story, if I may, of this guy who is collecting old barbershop music, a Republican music from the late 19th century. I mean, the stuff that's totally out of copyright, and was doing it over what do you call it? What's the word for BitTorrent? And yeah, and discovered that his ISP was downregulating his speeds, and became an activist. What do you think was the big lesson for you in making that movie, and what's the message that, and people are going to be able to see the movie later on here on Free Speech TV. What's the message that, what's the take home? What's the aha there for you?
The take home for me was, it was that I was originally making a different film, and I was making a film about the impact of the internet on music and the music industry, and I was trying to take an overall look at that, and I ended up at an FCC hearing thinking I was learning about piracy, because the issues get intertwined too often, and I ended up becoming aware of the neutrality issue, because it was with the help of Free Press that Rob did in fact file the case with the FCC. So what my takeaway from it was, and that's why the title is Barbershop Punk, is there's a moment when all of us have to be punks, in that we all have to go against the system and engage. And it's up to every person out there to say, hey, these are my civil rights, this is very important to me as an individual, and I need to stand up and be heard. And you can push back against the system. And what, for me, the super aha is there's one guy who's a Barbershop Quartet fan who got to engage the system on a very high level just by the nature of his tenacity. So I'm hoping with events like this, and with everything that everyone here on this panel is doing, that there's more engagement, and people get that little fire under them, and they stand up and say, fuck this isn't correct. We need to get out there and defend ourselves and defend our rights and make those phone calls and feel empowered to do so. That to me is the most important. That this is our government, and we need to take control of it and push back against a system that's favoring corporate control.
And Aaron,
yeah,
go ahead.
Well, I was just going to jump in and speak to what Georgia was referencing. A lot of this issue of net neutrality does indeed get tangled up in what to do about unauthorized file sharing. I'm someone who doesn't like to use the word piracy. I'm someone who doesn't like to use the word stealing. I think those words are counterproductive in this conversation. But for me, in order to have a career in a world where there's unauthorized file sharing, my goal is to create a legitimate digital music marketplace where people can have the option. When given the options, I think people are happy to support musicians the same way they're happy to go to their farm stand and talk to their farmer and buy the best tomato. I think that as we've seen with crowdfunding and in the last few years, I think that's been happening. To create a legitimate digital music marketplace, I need access, and people like me need access, and we need a level playing field for that. So separating those two issues is really important, and in fact, for me, net neutrality is actually a stepping stone to creating a legitimate digital music marketplace. So I just wanted to add that. And Future Music Coalition that I work with had a comment tool that they used in 2010, the last time there was a comment period for the FCC, and they'll be doing the same comment tool again ahead of the May 15th FCC hearing. So musicians or anyone who wants to be able to answer a few questions and have that compiled into a comment that can then be automatically submitted to the FCC can check that out, futureofmusic.org.
That's great. That's great. We have just a couple of minutes left. I'd just like to go through each one of you for a closing minute or two comment. I'll start with you, Josh.
Oh, let me unmute. So, yeah, I mentioned this before, but I think the most important thing that people can do right now is learn more about this issue and make a call. Make a call to the FCC. We're flooding the FCC Chairman Tom Wheeler's phone lines. It's pretty awesome, actually. We drove like 1,000 calls to his office over the last couple of days, and the office is saying that they're overwhelmed and they can't keep up with all the calls coming in, that's a good thing. So I would go to SaveTheInternet.com and learn how you can make that call as well. And in addition, call your members of Congress and tell them to make the call to Tom Wheeler. This is actually bouncing off of something, Tom, that you said earlier. President Obama is, technically speaking, not allowed to tell the FCC what to do. It's an independent agency. And so it's actually up to Congress to tell the FCC what to do and to oversee the activities of that agency. You need to tell your members of Congress that it's time for them to weigh in on this and to tell Chairman Wheeler that he's going down the wrong path here and that he needs to back up, start over again, and reclassify the Internet as a telecommunications service and treat broadband carriers as common carriers so that we can actually have the Internet that we deserve.
Great. Jamila?
So we're going to keep following this issue at colorlines.com. We're interested in talking with artists, with activists, and looking at this from an intersectional angle. So go to our website, colorlines.com, and you can learn a lot more.
Okay, great. That was nice and brief. Georgia?
I'm right here with, I think everyone needs to engage. I think this May 15th vote is very important. I'm sorry we didn't get to talk enough about the tiered service and Tom Wheeler with his, it's okay to have a fast lane as long as they're commercially reasonable, because it goes back to the old, Oscar Wilde or Groucho Marx quote about, negotiating about, haggling about the price. Once we have two tiers, then it's all over as far as I'm concerned, because there's no need to discriminate. You've discriminated by encumbering and putting people in the back of the bus. So I really, really hope everybody engages. Go to Free Press and Color Lines and all the other sites that you can find and engage and make those phone calls and get people educated. And I hope we're running my film on Free Speech TV, and I hope people watch it, get people that don't know what the issue is about to watch and tune in and turn on to it.
There you go. And Aaron?
I'm just going to echo my fellow participants and say continue to engage as culture makers, people out there who are culture makers. I would, get educated, futureofmusic.org, Free Press, Free Speech TV. Get educated about this issue and use your platform to talk about it. Content makers, culture makers are going to be deeply affected by this, as well as people who love those things. So keep talking about it, learn about it, and make some noise.
Cool. And I would add the current chair of the FCC is a former lawyer and lobbyist in this area. Before him, Michael Powell, Colin Powell's son, was the head of the FCC. Now he is, I believe, the head of the lobbying group for the telco companies. The people on the FCC all know that they have an opportunity to make millions once they leave the FCC if they do the right thing for the companies. And we have to make a loud enough noise and put enough pressure that they will do the right thing for the people instead. And I realize it's going to be hard to overcome that self-interest. So anyhow, I want to thank you all for being here and thank you for watching Free Speech TV.